Folks, today is a huge day. President Trump yesterday signed an executive order to dismantle the Department of Education, a move that conservatives have been lobbying for decades, basically since the day it was incepted. This is a huge win for freedom and is now going to shake the left up in all of their political alliances in the deep state, the fourth branch of the government. So we're going to stick around, hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, make sure you never miss another video from us again in the future. So first, let's talk about why this matters. The Department of Education was created in 1979 under the Carter administration. Since then, it has ballooned to a $268 billion behemoth, roughly 4% of the U.S. budget last year. Now, the Department of Education is responsible for handing out grants, loans, and enforcing civil rights rules for over 50 million students in the United States. But here's the thing. It has been a complete failure. They have spent over $3 trillion since 1979 with no real boost in student achievement. Looking at the nation's report card, reading scores flat since 92. Math barely up, and post-COVID gaps are still lingering from the effects of what the Department of Education forced upon different schools during the COVID pandemic, and even in the wake during the Biden administration, the horrible destruction that the Biden administration did to the country through the Department of Education, especially when it comes to vaccine mandates in schools, mask mandates in schools, and then forgiving loans for people. Just total reckless spending. And critics have said for a very long time that federal control just does not work. Education is a local issue. States and parents know best. It's more like local school boards with the consent of the people who elected them are the ones who should be implementing policy. And granted, most curriculum is done at the district level already or the state level already. But the reality is that the Department of Education uses these large grants that they give different school districts. They use these to implement policies that the administration, the federal government, wants to see happen. And we're going to go over a couple of these here. They push the Department of Education has pushed one-size-fits-all policies, like in 2014 when Obama sent what they call a Dear Colleague letter, which basically tied funding to racial discipline stats instead of fairness. So basically what happened was Obama sent this letter to different school districts that said, if you're handing out a punishment, let's say detention, to a group of students, and there is an inequity, there is a imbalance between the number of black students and white students that are affected by that same rule, that school districts must do more to make sure that those numbers are even. So let's just say there's a school. Let's say it's 80% white and 20% black, just for numbers right now. And they implement a new rule that if you throw anything at a teacher, you throw something at a teacher, you get detention. Well, if that rule, that if you throw something at a teacher, disproportionately affects black Americans or black people in those schools, regardless of why they're disproportionately affected, but that is racist and that they need to either reduce the number of punishments that are handed out to black students and make it equal to white students, or they would lose federal funding. But see, here's the thing. They don't take into account the fact that what happens if black students are committing or doing that offense at higher rates or at a higher proportion than their white counterparts. They would not take into fact the reality that maybe a certain group of people are committing breaking a rule at a higher rate than another group. Not because they're black or not because they're white, it's just they are. As long as the actual rule itself doesn't discriminate against black Americans, it's, hey, if you throw something at a teacher, you get detention. Well, is it racist that the 20% of black students committed an infraction at a higher rate than their white counterparts? No, it's not. And this is the deranged one-size-fits-all policy that the Department of Education has pushed down. And don't get me started with the LGBTQ divided sign, plus minus sign mandates, student loan handouts. It is a complete overreach by the federal government. And Trump's executive order needs to be a sledgehammer to this nonsense. So what exactly did Trump do today? And let's just take a look. Here's a wonderful video of Trump signing it. And we'll pull up the actual executive order right here. So at a White House event in the East Room, surrounded by kids and desks and GOP governors like Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott, Trump signed an executive order directing Education Secretary Linda McMahon to take, quote, all necessary steps to close the Department of Education. I could not be happier. The White House summary says it's about returning education authority to the states will keep an uninterrupted delivery of key programs like Pell Grants and special education funding. Trump even quipped, hopefully, Linda will be our last education secretary. But here's the thing. Trump can't fully kill it by himself. Congress has to vote to shutter the cabinet agency, but this executive order starts the process by slashing jobs, shifting duties of the Department of Education elsewhere to other departments, which is really going to pressure lawmakers to eventually finish the job. There's been reports that say that the department has already lost half of its staff since Trump took over 2 months ago. And this is just red meat for the conservative base. Less government, less regulation, more freedom. From a conservative perspective, this is a slam dunk. Number one is states' rights. The 10th Amendment says that if it's not in the Constitution, it's up to the states. Education is not in there. DC should butt out. DC, hey, I'm okay if the DOJ takes over the responsibilities for enforcing civil rights violations. I'm okay with that. I think we should keep that at the federal level. The federal government, when it comes to distributing Pell Grants or other federal grants to school districts or to low-income areas, I'm totally okay with that. Funding for special education, I'm totally okay with still funding that. We are not going to have one behemoth agency that is going to push down a one-size-fits-all. These need to be block grants that are delivered using a formula of, the revenue, income, population, lots of different factors that go into it. But they need to use a formula to distribute these block grants without strings attached. That's how we need to make sure that no future president. And here's the thing: people are saying that Trump's a dictator. He's a dictator. How is he a dictator for returning power over education to the states? A dictator tries to bring all the control to himself. Well, that's not what's happening, though. He is sending education back to the states. He's trying to make it so grants and Pell Grants cannot have strings attached to them when they're given to different school districts or states. And here's the number 2. Parental power. No more federal busybodies telling schools what to teach or how to push. Think about it. Local boards, moms and dads can ditch the woke agenda and focus on reading, writing, math, history, the things that actually matter. Number 3, taxpayer savings. Why pour trillions into a system that fail our kids? Why? Trump says we spend more per pupil than anyone, yet we're outpaced by Europe and China. Let states compete, cut the fat, and win. Because let's be real, this kills liberals are beside themselves about this. The left is freaking out. Hakeem Jeffries went as far to say it will harm millions of children. But no, it was the fact that the Department of Education was pushing a one-size-fits-all policy on Americans on different fronts is what was hurting kids. And with red tape and bad policies, you want to know something? For every dollar in grants that are sent to states, only about 60 to 65 cents are actually spent on the purpose of it. 30 to 35% of every dollar that's sent is spent on administrative costs, and administrative costs that are used that they need to hire people so they can in turn, because the process to apply for all these grants is so complicated that they need to have administrators that apply for these grants. We need a no strings attached formula that allows block grants to be given to different states, school districts, what have you. We do not need a complicated process where we make sure that each school has an equity plan and all this bullcrap. We cannot let another president do what Joe Biden did as president. And of course, the left is freaking out, and they're not going to take it lying down. Teachers unions like the NEA are, of course, screaming it'll steal resources and gut civil rights. Lawsuits have already been filed by 20 Democrat attorney generals, filed last week after the layoffs hit 1,300 staffers. And as of right now, polls show that the public is pretty split. Recent Quinnipiac poll says 60% of voters oppose this, but only 20% of Republicans do. Same thing with Reuters, about 65% are against it. Still, Trump's base really does love it. And here's the reality check. Congress is the hurdle. Republicans have a 53 to 47 seat edge in the Senate, but they need 60 votes to kill the department. Democrats most likely are not going to budge, so Trump's executive order might just gut it from the inside out. Mass layoffs, program shifts to other departments. It's really going to be a hollowed out agency where the actual functions of the agency are going to be distributed to other agencies, because ultimately, if money is appropriated by Congress, they need to follow through with this, so we're just going to give it to other departments. But so the real question is, where do we go from here? Linda McMahon, obviously, on the hot seat. She said she's going to work with Congress to move more civil rights stuff to the DOJ, but Trump wants it done fast, and it could drag out into 26 or 27. And I'm going to say, for me, this is a dream come true. This is truly a dream come true for me. And the other part is issuing federal loans. This is my thought on federal loans for students. We should expand the federal student loan program to include trade schools, apprenticeships, on-the-job training. This should not just be funneling people into a 4-year degree. And here's the reality, is at its core, I don't even really want the federal government. If the federal government is going to subsidize it, okay, that's fine. Whether it's through tax policy, whether it's through direct subsidization, whether it's, a private government quasi-partnership, if the government, let's just say, paired up with a big bank like Wells Fargo, and they're able to negotiate lower interest rates on certain loans for certain types. But the federal government should not be issuing loans for people who do not have a plan. I'm a business owner. If I go to the bank and say, hey, I need $20,000 for my business, they don't just write the check and say, here you go. They say, what's your business plan? What's your revenue models? How much do you expect? When do you expect to break even? How are you logistically going to be able to take this money and turn it into revenue in the future? You have to have a business plan. Why is it that students who are going to school for lesbian dance theory can just apply for FAFSA and somehow get federally subsidized loans? The federal government should not be in the business of issuing loans. If they want to subsidize loans through a private company, sure. I'm fine with that, because ultimately it's in my view that it is the goal of the federal government to push the economy in the right directions. The government can't force you to do something, but we should make it a lot easier to do the right things. Like Trump. He wants to make it where if you manufacture your product here, you're going to have the lowest corporate tax rate in the world. That is something that is a policy decision that's made by the government we want businesses to build their products here. It will bring jobs here. It will bring economic opportunity and economic growth and economic activity into our economy. We want that. So we're going to tailor policy that is going to directly cause manufacturers to want to build their products here. That's great. We want people to have kids. We do. We want people to have kids. So what do? We give them tax credits, child tax credits. You know what I think we should do to subsidize people having more children? School choice, school voucher programs. Let's bring some competition to the education. Why is it that this government monopoly on education exists? Why? We all know that the lack of competition creates lethargic results. Why is it that teachers are insulated from this? Why are they insulated from competition? We should have private and public schools and charter schools. We should have public schools competing against public schools, private schools against public schools. We should have all different schools competing against each other. They need to be operated like a business, not in the sense that they need to make a profit, because they don't need to make a profit unless it's a private school that they operate to make a profit. But public schools should not operate to make a profit, but they need to operate like a business. If one school has a very, very bad, let's just say, math program, and another school has a very, very well science, technology, engineering, and mathematics program, STEM, well, obviously, if there's competition, people who are in one school district who might be forced to go to the school that doesn't have as good of a program can now use their vouchers to go to better schools, which is going to create higher demand for those schools, which means that the schools that are going to be left behind because they aren't competitive are going to need, what can they do to be more competitive? They need to innovate. They need to think, how can we do better for our students? Why do they not have the responsibility of attracting students to their school? This is what they need to do. They need to do this. And, like I said, school choice, 100%, this is the next move. But eliminating the Department of Education, moving its functions to other government, to other agencies, I'm all about. Because we all know they created the the Department of Education basically to pander to the teachers union. They basically said, we're going to endorse a candidate who's going to give us our own department. So then we can funnel money back to our donors and our friends at the universities. Why is it that the cost of college has skyrocketed? Why? Why is it that it's skyrocketed since the 1990s or the 80s or the 70s? Why has it skyrocketed so much? Maybe is it at the same time that the federal government got involved in student loans? A college now says, hey, look, the federal government, they're going to back these loans. We can charge as much as we want for the student to come here. Because we know it's backed by the full faith of the federal government, and they will print money before they default on their debts. It's like, good for these colleges for making a smart business move, but the gravy train's over. It's over. And if you're cheering this, drop a MAGA down in the comments. I want to know who out there is actually about this. Let me know your thoughts about this, and let me know. I think this is a disaster. Do you think it's a disaster? So that's going to be it for today, folks. Smash that subscribe button. We will catch you next time.